This is the FlyPi V2, a budget-friendly 3D printer host board from Mellow you can pick up for around $30 US. Inside the box, we've got a bag with some connectors and pigtails, a USB A to C cable, and the board itself. While this guy has some similarities to a Raspberry Pi, keep in mind it's not going to be a direct replacement for one in other projects. But what printer-related features does it have over a standard Pi? And should you use one in your next project just to save a few dollars? Well, first let's look at the board and see what's on it, and then I'll explain the reasoning why I decided to go this route. Okay, so looking down at the board, we have our all-winner H5 quad-core CPU. We've got two 512 meg RAM chips. Then below that is a reset button next to an eMMC boot button, accelerometer port. We have our GPIO pins down here, just like a Pi. We got an M.2 slot for adding our Wi-Fi, a couple dip switches that control all our USB to CAN bus interface, that's over here. Above that is a TFT screen connector, 5-volt header for a fan, and then we got our 12 to 24 volt power input. Up top is a USB-C port for our core UART, micro HDMI, and then a 3.5mm headphone jack. And jumping to the left is a 100 megabit Ethernet port and 4 USB 2A ports. One of the other benefits of this board is that it shares the same footprint as a standard Raspberry Pi, so if you do have a setup that you're replacing a Pi in, this little guy is going to mount right up, no problems. So why did I go with a FlyPi? Well, when the Raspberry Pi died, it seemed like the most cost-effective solution. Now there's a couple features I actually really liked, like the USB to CAN interface. That made sense to me personally because I was looking at using one of Mellow's CAN toolhead boards further down the line, so having it all in the same ecosystem. As a novice, it made sense. I thought documentation should be pretty good, should be able to set it up. It wasn't too bad, got through it in the end, but there were some challenges, I won't lie. And the other one was actually the mains power. Being able to hook up my printer's 24 volt power supply directly to the board was actually a big one. Now, if you've ever been in Klipper and you've been seeing those under voltage issues like Pi under voltage, this and that, when all you wanted to do was plug in a damn USB webcam to see what was going on with your print, then you know what I'm talking about. Power stability is a big thing, and having that has been actually awesome. So now let's get on to the software side. Now, how do we go about getting this board set up? As I previously mentioned, I'm still fairly new to all this, so I'll try my best to run through the basic steps on how to flash your OS, setting up your Wi-Fi, and making sure you at least have some idea on how to have a basic Klipper setup on this board ready to go. Now, for the most part, we are going to be using the Mellow website. They've recently done a bit of an update here because the documentation is miles better than it's ever been. There's multiple language options and every link's there and seems to work for the downloads, which is great. Previously, you have to jump between a pretty rough website, their GitHub and Team Gloomy's website to get all the documentation together to just get an idea of, you know, what each port was actually on your board. So props to Mellow, they're clearly doing a bit of work here and they seem to be listening to the community. So let's get started. Okay, to get started, we're going to head over to host computer. Then we'll jump across to FlyPi V2 on the left side and we'll go down to system flashing. A few links on this page we're going to need to go to. The first one's been a host operation guide. This is a very simplified beginner guide that has a whole bunch of dot points of the process we're going to be going over today. This might be handy for you if it's your first time setting this up, so you may want to keep this handy and keep it open in a tab just so you got something to reference back to. The next one is the system image itself. When you go to this link, double check you actually have the FlyPi V2 selected on the left hand side. This likes to default to the Fly C8 board for some reason, unsure why. And we'll scroll down and we're going to download the system image. One thing to check here is make sure you have the Fly OS image selected, not the bare bones one. And there's some login details here we're going to need to save for later on. And the last link is for the tools. So going to this link, we're going to download the SSH software. Obviously, if you want to use PuTTY or something like that, go for it. I'm just going to use MOBA for this one. Under that is the CH340 driver. You'll need to download this and get this installed before we connect the board via USB. Don't need this memory card software. But under that, we got the Win32 disk imager. Download that so we can flash the OS to the SD card. A couple tools we need to get going. We'll need a SD card reader. We're also going to need a micro SD card. In this case, I've gone with a 32 gig SanDisk, anywhere from 16 to 128 gig. Make sure you're using a class 10 card. Pop this guy into the card reader and we'll move over to Windows. So to format, I'm just going to be using Windows Disk Management, and I'm going to quickly format this SD card. And now we're going to move over to flashing the image. So if you navigate to the FlyOS image you downloaded earlier, make sure to extract this one. And once this is finished, we'll use Win32 Disk Imager. We will select that image inside the folder and make sure you select the right drive, which will be your SD card, and click write. Now, once this finishes, it's going to take a little while. It's actually going to pop up and say, do you want to format the card? Don't format the card. This is because it's now pretty much formatted only for the board to read. We can pop this SD card now into our board, and we'll connect this up to our PC via the provided USB A to C cable. And there's going to be a lot of flashing lights when this first turns on because it's going to do its initial boot up and setup. But once you see these two solid blue lights and a single flashing blue light, it hopefully, if all things went well, should be ready for us to SSH into.
How many lines of code are there?
About 2 million.
2 million.
Yeah.
In MOBA, we're going to head over to Session, and then we'll go to Serial and we'll select the board in there. It should have CH340 in there. If it doesn't, you might need to reinstall that driver. The speed, it's 115200, and you should be greeted by this screen if all things went well. At this point, I like to do a quick reboot. Not really necessary. I just like to do it for peace of mind to make sure everything starts back up fine without issue. Set up our Wi-Fi. We're going to type in sudo nmty to take us to our network interface where we can edit or activate a connection. We're going to go to activate a connection, select your network. I've selected a Wi-Fi network and I'll put in my password here. Obviously, if you're using Ethernet, you want to make sure you have a cable plugged in and select the wired connection. And once that's connected, we can go back to the main menu. Now we can go down to set a system hostname if we want and set the name of our printer, which I've already set in here. And then that's done. And we can exit this. And once again, I like to do a little reboot just to make sure everything's working well.
Hold on to your butts.
Once everything comes back online, we're going to type in IPA, which will show our network adapters. Obviously, I don't have an IP on the Ethernet adapter, but you can see on my wireless LAN adapter I do. So I'm going to take this IP now and I'm going to create a new session in MOBA. And we're going to SSH directly to the IP of the FlyPi. So going over to session again, we'll go to SSH, we'll put our IP in here. Now we'll need that username and password from the Mellow website. Ask for the username, which is Fly. The password is Mellow, which I've already actually logged in here before, but now we'll be in the directory of our FlyPi. Over on our browser, we're going to use that same IP with the port of 80. Make sure we can access our printer. And there we go. In this instance, I'm using Mainsail as my interface, but you can use Fluid if you like. There is one more thing I wanted to show you guys. If you jump up here again and we change this port number, we'll get taken to Mellow's Fly Tools, which is a nice user-friendly interface to see everything else you've got plugged into your board. And you can actually also head over to the side here where you can compile firmware if needed. With little handy drop-down menus to select the board. If you want to assign any special pins. And then you can also go over to the right and you can burn that firmware to the board, either over CAN bus or straight to an SD card if needed. So all that's left is to install our board on our printer and you should be good to go. So there we go, we have our FlyPi all set up with Klipper. Hopefully this video was helpful for some of you. I think this board makes sense for beginners. It's fairly cheap. The more people use it, the more there's probably going to be revisions and better documentation, which is great. However, I think if you are a die-hard Pi person, you're probably going to want to stick to a Raspberry Pi, which is fair enough. If you know the ins and outs, completely makes sense to me. But for $30 US, can't complain. Pretty good board. So I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.